Today's Seagull Wow is dedicated to governance, esports, and integrity, and of course, the women leading the charge. And I'm absolutely thrilled and delighted to have Michelle Verroken, who's Director of Sport Integrity, an international sports consultancy specializing in integrity and governance, as our special guest for this edition. Michelle, your expertise in relation to sports governance and anti-doping matters is simply incredible. And I counted at least 20 sports that you've worked with during your impressive career. So we're going to start from the very beginning. And please, can you share with our global audience your career journey? What inspired you to pursue a career in sports integrity?
Well, thank you, Katie, and I'm delighted to share some thoughts on this. But I started my career as a teacher and lecturer, and I was really involved in integrity from the very start because I trained in the art and science of movement, which means that I was looking not only at the sciences, and a lot of students now study sports science, but I was also looking at the art, which means not just the beauty, but also the ethics. So I think it's been embedded from the start, really. But as I say, I moved on from the academic world into working in the public sector and rose to being Director of Ethics and Anti-Doping at UK Sport. So responsible there for all matters, including anti-doping, safeguarding, being able to try and get a dispute resolution system for the UK, being able to help develop the services that we have for our athletes. And so there was an awful lot packed into that. And I moved on from there really at a time when I couldn't see the UK really embracing integrity in the way that it should be, and certainly not creating an independent anti-doping organization until much later. But I did an awful lot with the anti-doping world, certainly creating a lot of things that I'm very proud of, and I'll go on to speak about shortly. But then after moving on from the public sector, I wanted to have a little bit more freedom to actually say no sometimes as well. And that helped me to get my own integrity up front and center of what I was doing. So founded Sporting Integrity in 2004. And, we've been going from strength to strength ever since. I spent 20 years volunteering with the Commonwealth Games Federation, running their medical and anti-doping services through numerous youth and main games, as well as running the consultancy. And I'm delighted that we've been working with ESIC certainly since 2015. And the esports world is extremely interesting, but also mixed martial arts from about the same time. But earlier than that, actually, I got picked up by professional golf, both the men's and the women's, and then the amateur game, and have certainly been supporting their anti-doping programs and originally helping the International Federation to develop their program. And more recently, Professional Triathlon sought me out and said, look, can you help us with what we're trying to do? And we've got a really exciting program that there'll be a lot more information on shortly. But, it's delightful to work with such a range of clients. And I'm sort of mean what I say. I like to work with people who are committed to integrity.
I think that's just such a strong statement from the to close with your opening, to work with people who have a genuine commitment to sport integrity, which is our ethos at SIGA. So many sports that you've advised. What is your biggest achievement to date in positively transforming the industry, which has resulted in cultural change? Because you mentioned doping, you mentioned governance. What is it that you are most proud of?
Gosh, to be honest, there are so many milestones. So there's not just one thing that I've thought about the fact that we created the independent sampling officer approach to sport, whereas originally most sports had their own testing officers from within their own volunteers or medical services. And so I brought in the independent sampling officer scheme that then became doping control officers, and out of competition testing, we built that program up. And it seems like decades ago now. Then the original drug information database, so all athletes could investigate whether or not they were taking a prohibited substance, through to, I'm very proud of sport resolutions, having really sort of argued for the funding for a dispute resolution system that was independent of sport here in the UK. And then, of course, more recently, to help IMAF achieve WADA code signatory status within, actually a period of about 4 months from start to finish. And to get the whole organization to be part of the big commitment. I just felt that, they got it from the point of view of this is just one integrity matter. And I feel, it's just a stepping stone. It's not just something I'll just regard as a sort of a laurel to sit on. I actually want to use it as a stepping stone for what's the next integrity matter that I'm going to tackle.
And great shout out to IMAF, because they're one of our SIGA founding members. So hello, Denzine and Kerith, wanted to shout out to you. But so many different milestones that you mentioned, which just shows, how far we've come, but also how far we've got to go. What are the biggest challenges you face when advising sports federations, whether they be international or national, to enhance their governance standards? Has there been pushback? And then, how have you overcome that to work with them so that they can see the benefits?
I mean, it's interesting you say that, because I felt certainly working at UK Sport, there was a lot of pushback at times from various different parts of the sporting world. And to me, it's very simple. You either commit to integrity, or it's never going to be part of your framing, your behavior. And I have found that sort of in itself quite challenging and very frustrating. But I think that the challenges come when people see integrity as just writing documents, and they fail to see the implementation. And the implementation goes, from start to finish and more, because once you've got your document in place, it's the practice of it that really goes on reinforcing integrity day after day after day. And it's being able to call out, does this fit with what we really are aspiring to? And I guess sometimes people consider me as a kind of, I don't know, I'm sort of sitting there as the kind of gentle reminder that, have we thought that we might include some women in this, or have we thought that we have got the right safeguarding standards, or has anybody remembered that we ought to be, putting out a stronger statement on how we accept this type of behavior? There's always something, and I think sometimes, and that's where people with integrity are prepared to speak up, and you have to be brave and you have to speak up.
On that point, have you ever experienced, can you share with our sort of younger audience, and some of whom are our mentees on the SIGA Women programme, any discrimination based on your gender when working in the industry? And sort of significantly, what are your tips to young women when dealing with this? How can they subvert it and move on without sort of alienating themselves from the organisation that they're working with?
That's such a difficult situation, because it's something I still experience even at my age and stage. As I say, it just sometimes I stop and I think, why on earth would somebody say that? But I think it's important for women in the industry to reflect, to actually think, am I comfortable with that? I mean, yes, you can use the benchmark of, would they have said that to a man? But actually, just, am I comfortable with that? Does that really reflect what I would want from a supportive colleague. And sometimes you have to be really brave and go back and help correct your understanding, even if you haven't been able to get that smart retort to somebody where you could just push something back and say, you know, not on my watch kind of thing. But you have to then go back and say, could I just clarify, is your thinking this? Because I just want you to know how uncomfortable that made me feel. But it does take a lot of confidence to do that. And sometimes, you know, I really do respect that, you know, we have to look out for each other in order to sometimes step in and say, you know, I don't really think that probably would have sounded right to whoever your colleague is, just to perhaps remind that sometimes people can misspeak, I think, and I'm being generous there because I know I've taken some real caustic comments in my time. I ought to write a book on all the worst caustic comments I've ever received. But, you know, for somebody to, you know, one time try and gaslight me into kind of, you know, are you disappointed with where you are in your career? And I'm like, what the hell? You know, because at your age, don't you think you should have been and I'm like, you know, I mean, the guy was a complete bozo, and it's just to just call him out on being a bozo would just not have been enough. But I just kind of, you know, I can't understand what would earth make you think that at all, and then just turn on my heel and walk away, just because actually sometimes stepping away and just being strong and saying, you know what, I don't want to play your games. It is sometimes what we have to do. Very, very difficult for, you know, the younger women coming in, trying to find your way, but, you know, don't sell your soul ever in this industry.
Really powerful advice. And I know in our global mentorship program, we have sort of developed some common language like red flag. And if you can get the people around you to know what red flag is, it means that you can say it and call it out without being too confrontational. But certainly I know there's been many a time I'm like, I wish I'd have said something smarter in my reply. But also walking away is other good advice. Moving to, I'd like to talk about the CIGA Independent Rating and Verification System. I know you're aware of it. For those new audience tuning in, it's called SERVS, and it's basically our independent tool to deliver accountability to sports organisations by independently assessing, auditing and rating them in accordance with our universal standards on sport integrity. And I'm sure and hope that we work together more, Michelle, in the future, because I'm sure your experience in advising some sports organisations to go through the SERVS would be absolutely invaluable. But from your perspective, how do we encourage more sports organisations that actually independent assessment is a positive and it leads to better business, trust, credibility with sponsors, fans, and the wider industry? Because I think that, you know, you mentioned before that this is a journey of governance and it's ongoing. It's not just getting the bronze, silver, or gold, or getting a good rating. It takes time, and you've got to have the commitment and willingness. But what would you say to those organizations that are more reticent to hold themselves to account?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited by SERVS. It sounds really crazy to be excited by something like, you know, sort of quality standards, but I am, because perhaps one of the other milestones I could have mentioned is I helped to take the Anti-Doping Directorate through the very first British Standards Institute certification for quality management, and no one else in the world had achieved that. But for me, it was the best way to actually build the infrastructure of the department and the accountability for being able to improve if we identified something that hadn't actually worked in the way that we thought it was meant to work, or we have found a better way. And what I think is really exciting, and I'm so glad that you're partnering with British Standards Institute, because it's a really good way to be able to set out what you believe the process of various processes should be. But then when something isn't isn't perhaps flowing in the way you thought it should, because most of the way we plan is theoretical, then you can engage with the practical realities and say, how can we now improve? And so you get continuous improvement, but you have the opportunity to have, you know, independent quality management people help you to improve those processes. And I know it always sounds quite pedantic because you're actually trying to draft a very dry process, but it actually helps you verbalize what you do, what you're trying to achieve, and to be able to demonstrate to your clients, to the sporting world, this is how you can trust us. And I think that's really important, that the quality management system helps to build trust. And that should mean everybody should want to try and have those people come in and say, are we doing it in the right way, or can we do it better, or how can we show our athletes that we can be trusted as sports organizations? So really, I'm hoping that we can build that with, certainly I know IMAF's very keen, and that would be one of my next projects to actually tackle.
That's good to hear. Liga Portugal are going through the good governance standards as we speak, and FIDE, the International Chess Federation, just joined as a SIGA member. So we're building the momentum, but there's still a lot of work to do. And I would say that it's about process, procedure, and as you pointed out, implementation, which is absolutely key. And to guarantee the trust, but also the sponsors and the global business also have a role to push for this change as well, because they are the investors in the sports industry, and it's in their interest too. And that's why we are continue to gain more traction with global sponsors, and why MasterCard has been with us since day one, which is great. But I'd like to now change tack, because I go more into the esports and your ESIC role, which, as you mentioned, you carried out since 2015. And we both participated in the recent ESIC Global Esports Forum. And I couldn't help but notice how few women were represented, both on stage and attending at the event. Is this representative of esports, and how can we encourage more women to not only join the industry, but feel comfortable in showcasing their achievements on stage when they are in the minority?
It's a very, very interesting industry, and esports, I mean, in some respects, it's so multifaceted, from, you know, the standard game you have on your phone right up to the, you know, the major arena events that I've been to, but it isn't always a comfortable environment for women, because it is so heavily dominated by men. There's a lot of, obviously, men that are boys that just like to play e-games, and sometimes the profile for the women gamers is just not as high, partly to do with sponsorship perhaps goes to the more attractive end, the top players, and they happen to be male. But on the playing side, I think there are an increasing number of playing opportunities, but women in the industry are not always finding their voice, and that's that means that we do really need to try and network better. There is a women in esports organization. I'm not part of it. I don't know really why I'm not, but I think what I try and do is give women a platform wherever I can to come and get involved with my side of it, because you know, one of my other achievements in many respects is to introduce an anti-doping program to the tier 1 esports level. That's games like League of Legends, Counter-Strike, where they are major arena games with you know, top prize money. And we didn't find the standard anti-doping approach was really successful. So I actually created a new approach to anti-doping and brought that in. but I worked on my confidence in the industry of anti-doping to enter the industry of esports. And although I'm not a gamer, I'm not a player, I find it quite fascinating. I find the people really fascinating. And I really don't feel that people treat me as if I'm just, you know, a sort of, I'm a little woman, pat me on the corner, but pat me on the head, put me in the corner. But I do feel that there isn't the encouragement to give women the platform that they should have. And I know I picked that up when I first saw the agenda and said, any women speakers? But I would say that. and I felt that confrontation there was necessary. And lo and behold, of course, they were finding the women speakers. But again, let me sort of speak up for people organizing conferences. Don't forget that when you invite a female speaker, they may not be able to say yes immediately. Why not? Well, of course, they may have all sorts of other things they just need to put in place, and be it childcare, be it organizing, you know, all sorts of other things. It really sometimes is more difficult. And I think also it's really important to have more ways of including women. And I think the pandemic should have taught us you can include women virtually without them having to do all those other things and get to somewhere, because it isn't always possible to be in 10 places at once. And I think that's sometimes where women do find themselves really stretched across so many sort of avenues. And perhaps that isn't so true of some of our male counterparts. So, you know, and don't be afraid to speak up. I think, again, the fact that sometimes you are a presence, but you're not a voice, is something that women in the industry are also, I don't want to say guilty of, because it sounds like we're wrong, but we also find ourselves doing. We're filling ticking a box. We're filling a gap that was left for a woman, but our voices are being quietened down. Let's put it that way. You can tell why people wouldn't invite me to speak. I speak too much.
No, I'm nodding my head because obviously we encountered, you know, the WOW pop-up was live there. And one of the issues was, of course, that I wanted you to speak and you couldn't make it. And so then this is the beauty of having the Sega WOW digital. So we could show a clip from that as well and combine it. But definitely agree that virtual and hybrid is the way forward. The Summit on Female Leadership in Sport is hybrid, but also it's just the way that the modern world is going. But agree about a difference between being a presence and a voice. And it's certainly something that I was quite shocked to encounter, you know, in this world, really, because the WOW show is about creating a platform, and sometimes maybe, you know, there are other factors why women don't want to come forward, whether it's family pressures or pressures within the organisation. So I think great to have you so candid and leading from the front on that. I just wanted to quickly touch on, obviously, you've advised both traditional sport and esports. What are the main difference in governance challenges faced by esports versus traditional sports?
Yeah, I mean, esports does not have the same traditional infrastructure of athletics or cycling, where there's an international federation and national federations, and that is the reality. And anything that's more commercial is built out, you know, sort of onto that. I think the industry is led by different aspects, be it promoters, be it the games publishers themselves, or the teams sometimes grouped together, and so there are different aspects. So that's what makes the industry, you know, sort of many respects dynamic. And that is a challenge for governance, because whenever you're in a commercial environment without the opportunity to actually have some minimum standards of conduct, behavior, beyond that which the law lays down, let's say in contract law, employment law, or and also they're working across different legal jurisdictions, because many times they might not be based in one country, they're moving between. So I do think it's there are vulnerabilities that can emerge, and it's not a very well understood industry, because I do think there are genuinely a lot of teams that are building carefully in terms of player welfare, but others that actually sometimes their way of picking up and dropping players needs some considerable attention. So, but we're vulnerable to things like a publisher could just decide not to continue with the game, and that stops that particular game. If somebody said, we're taking away our football, you'd go and get another one, so you continue to play football. And football's played in, you and I could play football, and or we could get two teams together and decide how big or small we wanted those teams to be, how big or small we wanted the pitch to be, and FIFA would still be quite happy with that, but they would still run their World Cup. So that doesn't happen in the esports world. And I think that is where commercial realities sometimes can start to butt up against good governance standards. And because commercial realities don't always need the governance standards, they haven't necessarily embraced them as quickly and as with real vigor as they should have done.
Fascinating that you've been able to transition both, on the governance and the doping between both of them. And I bet it's just such an interesting comparison. You mentioned player welfare, and my final question is about mental health, which is a topic often discussed by athletes, and obviously esport athletes are no exception. Given the wide-ranging roles and responsibilities you have, Michelle, how do you juggle it all? Because I'm sure everyone tuning in at times needs some advice on this. I know I do sometimes. So give us your best tips on preserving mental health and stopping yourself stretching, overstretching yourself, and saying no, which was great advice you gave at the beginning.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I talk a good game, I think, on this one, because I do find myself just stepping away and thinking, why didn't I say no to that? Because you learn by your mistakes, really, in that respect. But I guess in terms of personal welfare, get a dog, definitely get a dog. A dog then, helps you get up in the morning and get exercise and all the other things, but get a dog. But apart from that, I think being able to just stop and breathe in order to really reflect and be able to just think, where is this going? Why is this? What's the motivation here? The reflection is when you am I really enjoying this? Ultimately will be a good guide. And then you have, I'm not enjoying this, I need to stop, and maybe I won't go back, maybe I need to stop doing that, or maybe I need to just think how I'm going to come at this a different way. And it's really difficult, because all sorts of things in an athlete's career make them stop: injury, failure, not winning when they expected to, loss of a coach or loss of a contract, something like that. And sometimes they can be real lows in a career, and then they do need some good support around them to just make them realize, you're still alive. That's the most important thing. If you're still alive, you can come back at this in a different way. Stroke your dog, fine.
and join us in our mission for raising the standards for sport integrity worldwide, because we do have a big job to do on that. Fantastic tips. I am going to seek one final question, if I may, which is, who inspires you the most?
Ooh, gosh, that's a tough one. There are lots of people who I look at and I admire how they've addressed things for themselves. So, gosh, difficult. I mean, from gosh, you really put me on the spot here. There's lots of people in the legal world, you know, the first women that actually managed to get their law degree, or actually, you know, pretended to be men and you know, sort of to actually achieve. You know, I'm inspired by them. I'd say Michelle Obama, because I got a feeling she was named after me, but yeah, but she's got 2 L's.
It's a good reason.
But you know, there are so many, and I think it's for different reasons. People who just there's not one. I mean, yourself, I love the fact that you engage with such energy, and I look at you and I think, gosh, I want that amount of energy all day long.
Well, maybe it's because I have 2 dogs, actually, which I don't recommend anyone getting. Certainly keeps me on my toes. But thank you so much, Michelle. You've been honest, candid, and walked us through your career journey. And I did read the CV beforehand, and we only just touched the tip of the iceberg. The work you've done to transform anti-doping across the world, governance, and we really look forward to collaborating with you at SIGA. I believe, and on behalf of myself and our CEO and the whole SIGA team, that that the 2 of us, our organisations, have some important work and collaboration to do in the future. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Katie. Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Today was the final group session of the SIGA Women Global Mentorship Programme for the 2022-2023 cycle. And what a programme it was, delivering global mentorship to 50 women from 32 countries represented around the world. And we are doubling the programme for the next cycle. It will be the 5th cycle of the programme, and applications open on Monday, the 1st of May, open until the 30th of June. Please apply and be part of the change.